And I'm ready for my story and poem whenever you are, Martin.
Okay, why don't we do that, David?
Okay, thank you. I wanted to begin with a little story. One day years ago, my mom was driving me around, and she told me this story about when she was very young and my dad was very young, and he and his friend Lee Erdy were driving on a vacation trip. They were young lawyers, and they came to, I believe, Milwaukee. And they got to this place, and there was a sign outside saying that there was a big Esperanto convention going on. And Dad said, "Well, why don't we go try it, see what's happening?" And they walked in, and the manager of the convention happened to be there and introduced himself. And Dad introduced himself and said that his uncle was Dr. Zamenhof. And the organizer was very, very impressed with that and wanted to know if Dad would like to attend the conference. And Dad said, "We would be honored to attend the conference." And said, "And we would like to know if you would like to address our conference." And Daddy said, "I would love to address our conference." And then the guy said, "And we would like you to address it in Esperanto."
Exactly.
And Lee looked at my dad in shock, and Dad said, "I would love to address your conference in Esperanto." And it was all arranged. Dad looked at his friend and said, "We got to get the heck out of here now." And so they ran away. They got into the car because Dad did not know a word of Esperanto. And they said, "Well, where do you want to go? We're still on vacation. Let's cross and go to visit Camp Moden," which was several states to the east. And so they drove all the way through Vermont, New Hampshire to Maine till they got to Camp Moden. And immediately Dad saw this gorgeous young woman who was running the waterfront there and fell in love with her, proposed to her at the end of his visit. And she was engaged to someone else at the time. And she had to eventually cancel that engagement in order to marry my dad.
Wow.
He did.
And became
Anyway,
your mom.
The story was, as Mom was telling this story, I was just fascinated by it. And it was her way of telling the story of how my parents met, which is really beautiful. And that brings me to my quote of the week. It is from Psalm 19, a Psalm of David. And I'm just going to read the opening lines to it and add an extra line in process. "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night revealeth knowledge, so long as the sky is clear."
Very nice. Very nice. Oh, yes, Michael.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask both rabbis a question, and maybe not to answer it at this time, but maybe to think about it. If somebody asked you, and both rabbis, I would say, if somebody asked you this question, then did God make man or did man make God? How would you answer that? You don't have to tell me now, but maybe at a later date, get into it.
Okay.
We'll wait till the Torah study group gets back to Genesis. And so we can take all that time to prepare the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an excellent question.
That was funny.
Michael. It's an excellent question.
But I think it's easy to answer.
As you offer, Michael, I want to think about it, but there are two books by Escher. One is Men Searching for God, and the other one is God Searching for Men.
Yes.
So you have a resource there. I do not record the details. I might look at it, but I'm accepting your chance of thinking about it.
Okay. Yes, Larry, and then we ought to get started.
The third question is, does it make a difference?
I like that.
Which is ultimately where Heschel ends
Yes.
up.
Yes.
Ultimately, right. Whichever answer speaks best, resonates more with you, that it's fine, right? Mhm.
Good point. Very good. Nice little discussion there. Michael, you always raise some interesting questions that could always take up a 30-hour conference. Very good. Anyway, I'm going to read our prayer in Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Amen.
And I thought that I think we are on Exodus 3, verse 7. Is that correct?
It's okay.
I'll tell you in a sec.
I wrote down you wanted to revisit verse 6.
Yes, there are several things before we read verse 7. One of the in verse 6, I think I had a chance though to comment that there is that God, when God is speaking to Moses, part of it is he lists the history in the book of Genesis. Okay, the patriarchs, the 3 patriarchs. And so he's making a very affirmative statement. But I wanted to ask the question. In my book, verse 6 reads, I am, he said, the God of your father. I don't know if that's in every translation, but the comment, I am, okay, it's going to take part of it's going to be part of our major discussion today. But any comments about I am?
Well, it's definitely the idea that he, I am that I am, which comes a little bit later. And when they ask what his name is, and that's all he says. But what really impresses me about verse 6 is the kindness that God is showing to Moses.
Yes.
He's going to ask Moses to do a major life-changing thing that'll change the course of his entire life, but he's doing it so kindly. I mean, I just wanted to point that out.
Very, very well stated. Yes, Rabbi. And then
Okay,
Michael.
Two things, one quickly and one a little more extensively. Anochi, which is the Hebrew that they're translating now as I am. Okay. Anochi is one of the traditional 70 names for God.
Mhm.
So it's not just a statement, an affirmative statement of I am, I exist. It's this is my name. Anochi is the first word of the 10 Commandments. Okay, that becomes
Right.
an important statement there. But there's a very, very famous midrash that I would like to read to you about
Please.
this, and it picks up on what David is saying about the kindness and the understanding on God's part. And it's attributed to Rabbi Joshua bar Nehemiah, who said, when God revealed himself to Moses, Moses was but a novice in prophecy. So the Holy One said, if I reveal myself to him in a thunderous voice, I will terrify him. If in a whisper, he'll take little note of me. What did God do? He revealed himself in the voice of Moses' father. Whereupon Moses answered, here I am, Hineni, what does my father wish? And God said, I'm not your father, I'm the God of your father.
Okay.
In my need to win you over, I dressed you in a familiar face so that you would not be afraid.
Mm,
So
Nicely
it's a
put.
lovely midrash.
Which
Takes us down
also
to-
leads me
that's
into
beautiful.
a discussion.
Mhm.
How do we approach our children? How do we approach our parents? How do we approach the workers in a business or people who come to help us out? What is the approach we should get from this? We can take from this. Yeah, yes, Michael.
I want to get back to a moment ago. What I see that's missing, the way it's written in what I have here, is that what is missing for me is I am God. In other words, they're stated immediately. Now, he said the God of your father, but to say it right at the outset, I am God of your father, instead of the other way around. That's what I'm getting from this.
Okay. But what does it mean by all of these when somebody approaches anything that they want to convey to others, whether you're a boss or a parent, a child, student, teacher, doesn't matter. But what do you have to keep in mind, rabbis or ministers? How do the rabbis approach us?
With kindness,
Kindness.
right? Kindness, with compassion, with respect.
Do they come and say, this is what you will do? No. What is the approach they take?
With guidance, guidance, without insulting, with guidance, with care and love. So anytime I am teaching, rather than say, you must do this, I will say, let's look at it in a way that we can both enjoy it.
Good way, good point. Any other ideas? Yes, Rabbi.
Don had his hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, his picture moved for me. I
Ah.
apologize. Okay. I was looking, he was at the lower end of everything. Now he's at the upper end. Okay. I'm sorry, Don.
Yeah, I do want to get back to your earlier question, but your most recent question, I always ask someone if they're willing to do what I'm asking. Because it's always free will that gets involved. But I just had a question earlier. Your first question, Marty, was whenever I see I am in the text, I always wonder about how verb tense is represented in Hebrew, because I know there are no tenses, really, the way we understand verb tense in Romantic languages. So when God says, I am the God of your father, how does that show up in Hebrew?
Well, I think the rabbis answered that.
The Hebrew, as I was saying before, says Anochi, which is a more royal I rather than the pronoun ani. And going back to Michael's question, historically they would understand that Anochi means I am God, comma, the God of your fathers, the God. That's the way that they would understand it. I'm not sure that that's exactly the way that the trope in chanting would show it, but I would guess that the intention was that there would be a comma after the Anochi. And Don is right that there's no present tense in Hebrew to the verb to be. There's past tense and there's future tense, but the present tense is only understood, which means that it's frequently misunderstood.
We're going to be delving into that very question later. It comes up in this parsha. Yes, David.
Yes, and the other interesting expression is something that we say every day when we do the Shemona Esrei, and we don't use Anochi, but we use Elohei. So Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. Every day we say it that way. Those of us who do the Amida.
Very, very good. Yes. Excellent commentary. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
As I was looking at it, and I never explained that to myself. Let's say that I'm Anochi, let's say that I'm not Anochi, but I would say I'm Miri, the mother of Uri, the mother of Yuval, and the mother of Yael, as giving an entry. You probably know Yael, you probably know Uri. And that's why I say, and that's a very common way that I do introduce myself, knowing that the others have known my kids from school or something to make that connection. So now I know you. You are related to someone that I know. So it just crossed my mind about it. Thank you.
Yeah, Marty, I think that goes back to your question, that of how do we approach someone whom we're trying to help, guide,
Yes.
a child, a grandchild, an employee, whatever, is we introduce ourselves first and we try to find some common connection, like Mary was saying. Okay, so you may know of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm that God.
Well put. Well put. Any other discussion? Yes, Larry.
In Genesis, there were promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about creating a great nation, and people as numerous as the stars in the heaven. So I think that's implied here, that he is a continuation.
Right. Very good. Very well put. Any other comments? So now God is in it, not only has the burning bush been a symbol, as we discussed last week, but now God is introducing himself. It's not just something that God can do, which in and of itself is very awesome. But now you hear God speak. Okay. And so what in verse 6, after Moses hides his face because he's afraid to look at God. Okay. And so now it brings us to verse 7. So if David, if you would just read verse 7.
I shall, I'm proud to do that. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people that are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their pains, and I am come down to deliver them.
Okay,
It's not finished yet.
you went on to verse 8.
No, it's oh well, all right.
Okay. I am mindful of their suffering, or okay. Any comments about what we've just read in verse 7? Yes.
Just to point it out for those who may not have noticed, this is now the Lord speaking and not God speaking. It's a different narrator,
Right.
different editor, different source. And a question is why? What's the difference?
Is there? Anyone? Yes, Chris.
I read in here where I think the Lord is assigning himself to be the leader of this people. He is choosing us to be his people. And can't get any better than that.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Bev.
Well, I think that the feeling of it is that he is aware of the suffering, and he is aware of he is sympathetic. He is that he loves his people, and that's why he is going to be the leader, the God.
Good. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I haven't been last week, I think for 2 weeks, but the last time I just mentioned at the very end of our session, the issue of Adonai needed to hear the people in order to do something. He saw them, but he didn't do anything. But he heard. So here we have two senses working. I saw them. So for seeing them, he doesn't need anyone. But shamati, it means I heard. So someone was communicating. And what I mentioned, and excuse me, Rabbi Norman, but if you think differently, that God needs the assistance of human beings. Until you call for God or you do something, you're not going to be helped. Just by God seeing you, you have to put something in there as well. Yeah. Because otherwise we said, well, does he need his screams, his yells? I see it. And now I'll be waiting. So anyway, that's one of the things that I love about our, I don't want to use the word religion, but our beliefs is that, guys, we have to do something. We cannot just trust that we're going to be helped with us sitting with crossed heads.
Good points. Suzanne, you had your hand up.
Yes. I have a tendency when I see the word Lord, I have a tendency to think that means Yeshua. I mean, that's just me.
Okay. All right.
Can you explain that, please? Can you do you know what's behind your thought?
Oh, yes. There are, this is, I can't say it's necessarily taught in churches, but there are people, Christians, I guess I'll say, who study scripture and believe that Yeshua it was alive and well before he made an appearance as Mary and Joseph's son, and that his appearance is kind of sprinkled throughout the Torah and also other books in the Old Testament. I mean, that's how I look at it. And Christians always say Lord and Savior. So that's why I always think of Yeshua or Lord. I associate that word with Yeshua and Father with God. I mean,
Thank you.
That's just.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Any other comments? Yes, Michael. I don't know who is first, Michael or David.
Michael, take it.
Okay.
I personally, I see the word Lord and God in one of the same. I also see it in the writings, in what is being said that the word Lord would seem to fit better in certain situations, and God in others.
Mhm.
Now, God has many names,
Right.
especially in the Hebrew,
Thank you, Bruce.
and so known. And so I believe this is simply, not simply, but one of those situations where it's just used interchangeably, Lord and God. That's the best that I could come up with.
Okay,
My thinking.
okay.
And Wendy has something she would.
Okay, you're confusing me, David. You raised the wrong hand for Wendy.
This is the Wendy hand.
Okay. Yes, Wendy.
I'm either going to clear up Michael's question or just make it even more convoluted. When I was in school, like in the biology class, when we were talking about evolution, our teacher said, here's what scientists have said. They give God credit for making that first molecule that eventually evolved into man. So that, and they figured, so that's what that's the best the scientists could do, but that's a thought, because we know nobody knows how long God's days were. Anyway.
Very good point.
Thanks, sweetheart.
That's going to lead into one of our discussions, but I want to, the Lord, okay, God says, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt. Okay, and I am mindful, and ... and I am mindful of their sufferings.
Mhm.
Okay, if we would just be kind enough to turn back to Exodus 2, the very end of Exodus 2, verse 23 through 25. David, could you read that, please?
Okay, I'm here.
Sure. And it came to pass in the course of these many days that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of their bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of the bondage. And God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God saw the children of Israel, and God took cognizance of them.
Okay, and you see that verse 7 is sort of a reiteration,
Mhm.
and
It's the same. It is the same. It is a reiteration. You're right, Martin.
so there's a commentary I have here, and I do not know the actual Hebrew words, but it says here the English does not convey the Hebrew progression, which literally says seen, heard, known. So I have to defer to our rabbis what is being referred to here, but if we think in terms of what we have read and what we will read in Torah, when we get into the discussions about God's name, think of this, because we're going to be reading what God is actually, he sees, he hears, and he's become mindful of what is going on in any comments about that?
Well, Marty,
Yes, Rabbi.
let me help a little bit with the Hebrew. Actually, the comment that you're referring to puts the verbs in a different order. Okay, than what's
Okay.
in
Thank
the
you.
text. Okay. First, if I'm looking directly at verse 24, so first is hearing,
Right.
then is remembering. And
Right.
that's not just a memory trigger. That's the Hebrew word vayizkor here. And we all know the word yizkor, right?
Right.
Which is more than just remembering facts and remembering the alphabet or whatever. Yizkor also is empathetic. It's having
Right.
it's connecting with the thing or the person whom you remember. Okay, so God heard, God remembered, or identified with, or had empathy with, and connected to the covenant. Then God saw, and here's where there's different ways of understanding the last verb. Either God understood, God acknowledged, or if you change the vowel pattern, God made himself known to the Israelites. So that would be the order of the verbs in the
Okay.
text. But I would also point out, again, only as a leading question, if you will, Socratically,
Please.
that this is with Elohim, this is not with Adonai. So this is God's response, not necessarily Adonai's response, if you accept the theory that they're different authors, not different gods.
Yes.
Okay, but different authors who are telling the story in a little different way for whatever reason.
Okay. Very, very, very good. I thought I saw you. Okay, no, David had his hand up and then Michael. David, you are muted.
On the great meeting.
I had a thought about God watching and God listening and God hearing, but waiting for things to happen so he could think, now I can help you. Well, now think back to your science fiction books. Was God like the puppet master? Was he testing them with everything that was going on until they decided we're ready to do something more? That just hit me as we were listening to all that.
That dovetails into my next question. You're reading my mind, Wendy. You're reading my mind. And I think that your question is very, very important, which we will be discussing momentarily. Yes, Michael.
Okay. Now, I don't want to go too far afield, but I want to ask this question, if I may. The Lord or God responded to the plight in Egypt. That started the Exodus. Why did the Lord or God not respond to the outcries of the Jews in the Holocaust of the 30s?
Okay.
I noticed the rabbi smiled a little bit when I asked that.
Well, this opens up a different discussion. We've had this discussion before, but it is a I would refer you to there are two philosophers. One is Primo Levi, and the other is
Emil Fackenheim.
Yes, two different approaches to this, and it may give you some understanding of the different ways of looking at this. Okay, and that's all I can say. And there are others too. Yes, please, Rabbi.
Yeah, and Michael, the reason that of the little smile, and it when I say it, it almost comes across in a humorous way, but I don't necessarily mean it humorously. The parallel story, and your question is certainly
Yes,
a deep, legitimate, authentic question that all of us struggle with in one way or another. But to make the parallel to this story, the simplest answer, and again, I don't mean it flippantly or humorously, is that it took 400 years for God's response, more than 437 exactly, for God's response to be seen and experienced. And we have a while to wait yet, if that's God's plan.
Either that or this is going to be, this opens up our discussion now, because the rabbi is putting it into a different perspective, but it's true. Why wait 400 plus years? Would it have been better to do it at an earlier point, which is what might, become involved? So I wanted to discuss this and find out what everyone's opinion is about that very question, because it comes up over and over again and doesn't have a really good answer, because there are answers. And any ideas? Yes, Joanne.
A little bit far-fetched maybe, but I think it depends on each of us. And I heard General Powell yesterday, and someone said this is, etc., what happened. But his words were, and what they said about him, he was always respectful of all people. We do not know what their life and what they are suffering or what their plight is. And I think each of us, and I don't know how to make the whole world do this, but I think each of us, if we're aware and respectful of other people, then maybe we won't have those 437 years.
Good. That's a very good point. Yes. Ricky.
In both instances, the 400 years and the 4 years or 5 years or whatever it was in Europe, it's one thing for the sufferers to cry out. But in both cases, I see where somebody else came to their side to assist them in escaping whatever was the issue that was at hand. Moses in the Old Testament, and then the Americans, if you want to say, in Europe, that if crying out for help isn't enough, is what I think I'm trying to say. You have to get off your butt and do something, or somebody has to be your champion and do something. So I think that's the parallel there.
Good point. Very good point.
Marty, I would like to say, and this is quite cynical, but it's very close to my heart. The numbers in the Torah are numbers. And in my mind, Sarah didn't live 100 and whatever, and she didn't give birth in whatever age she was, and so forth. So the 400 for me would be a lot of years, really a lot of years. So that will be one thing. The other one could be an issue of escalating the burden. At first, they did the bricks, and then they had to bring the straw to break the bricks, and then they have to do something else. So it got to a point in which I just added, this is my point in which I cannot take it anymore. So that's another thought. I mean, yeah, that's another thought that I have.
Okay, well, that's reasonable. Okay, okay. I don't know who had their hand up first, Suzanne or Don.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Don. I just wanted to say that I do believe it was in Genesis that God told Abraham it was going to be 400 years.
Yes.
I don't believe he said Egypt necessarily, but he did say there was going to be a time of, you know, this 400
Yes.
years.
Mm-hmm. Very
So,
good point.
yeah. So, you know, God was honoring his word. I mean,
Okay.
but for the people that went through their, you know, went through it, but I mean, it is what it is.
Okay. So this is prophetic.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Don. Thank you, Suzanne.
I may bring on divine retribution here, but I do spend a lot of time now outside the scriptures in archaeological work, and there is some convincing evidence that the 437 years may not be entirely accurate. And I just read the El Amarno letters, which came off the tablets found in Egypt, which tend to compress that time quite a bit, and also to merge some of the Hyksos history with that of the Hebrews. So since there's nothing in the scriptures really lines up with Egyptian history, I'm not saying that scriptures are wrong, but there is some question, and it doesn't conflict at all with the fact that God recognized the plight of the Hebrews finally. It just they may not have been suffering for 437 years.
But even if it was 237, it's still a long time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, I just want to say that our generation and our experience, we're not the first ones to encounter the notion of fake news, you know, or revisionist history, or, you know, to prove
That's
the
right.
point kind of thing. And I would second what Rabbi Miri was saying. You know, we really don't know what a year or a day might have been. Now, in God's eyes, in the experience of the people that we're talking about, a year may have been a season. It may have even been a month. We just don't know. But even today, in our slang, in our lingo, we come up with certain numbers, you know. And in Jewish tradition, because Moses, supposedly lived 120 years, so we wish everyone a full life of 120 years. We don't really expect people to live to be 120, but we say that phrase. So again, 400 years may have been a recognizable, meaning an awful lot of years, a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But everyone may recall, we have had this discussion going back 3 years ago.
Many years ago.
Right? Many years ago. Okay. Umpteen years ago.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So
Exactly.
I think this is, you know, what we're getting after here, but it's a long time. And so let's say, for the sake of discussion, So God, it knows what's going on. And he has, and everything. He has heard the plight. He has seen the plight. He empathizes with this frustration of his people. Okay. And it's all on the basis of his covenant. Could he be waiting for the right person to come along? As was mentioned, yes, Larry.
I was waving goodbye to Anne. Okay. Okay, but the right person leads me into a question I had from last week. Here we have Moses, who is a very modest person, and he did not appear in the book of Genesis. But two of my commentaries, Robert Alter and Everett Fox, refer to our Torah as the 5 books of Moses. Now, why not 5 books of God or any other Abraham? Why Moses do we refer to the 5 books?
It's a good question. Rabbi?
Well, the simple traditional answer is that Moses is the one who transmitted the Torah traditionally.
Right.
Moses transmitted the Torah to Joshua, then Joshua to the elders, and et cetera, and on down. So it's not, and then the corollary or corollary, whichever way you want to pronounce it, the corollary is that Moses wrote the Torah, including book number 1. So it's five books of Moses, the author, except for the last 2 or 3 sentences.
Right.
Yeah.
Which raises another question. There are some people who feel that the entire Torah was already written at Sinai.
Mhm.
And, so Moses is extending the prophecy for the people. It's a tremendous discussion that could take place with this. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I want to pose a question based on wording that come up. First, I look at it in Hebrew, and then I look at Friedman translation. Without going into where verse it is, the way that God sees the people, he sees, and he heard, but the way that he saw is they saw their affliction, they saw their suffering, he saw that oppression. So we have different ways of describing, I don't want to say suffering again because that's right, pain or bad times. Is any idea why, and in the Hebrew is the same thing, why this kind of, the word oni I know from the Haggadah of Pesach, and we say oni, and some we discuss that it's poverty, but in this case and in the other one is about torturing. So you have really different words of bad times. Any idea why it would be that way?
Well,
Do I have to ask again?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question.
That's what I thought. Okay, in the description, if after God listens and hears the screaming and they're asking for help, he says, and this is what God saw. And he saw oppression, he saw affliction, he saw suffering. Why did he see different types of, what word shall I use, of, being bad to
Of persecution.
us. Persecution.
Yes. I do have a commentary here that sort of relates to what the question you're asking. It centers around the word outcry. Okay. And here I need help because I'm not, I do not understand all of the Hebrew stem words. The Hebrew stem, TS.
Tzadik Ayin Kuf.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Tzoek, tza'akatam, they're crying out or their outcry. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's pervaded by moral outrage and soul-stirring passion. It denotes the anguished cry of the oppressed, the agonized plea of the helpless victim. I don't know if that it's got.
Yeah, it's a Marty. I think etymologically, I think you're on the right track following that. It's not crying with tears.
Right.
Right. That's a different word. It's not shouting with volume. It's outrage, it's pain, it's all of those motivations to expressing oneself verbally.
So I think there may be a little more going on here. It isn't appealing us from a standpoint of ethics. It's from morality.
You're going to get into a conversation that now Michael's the one who's smiling.
I did that intentionally.
Right. Okay.
because Michael raised this question before.
Right, the other day.
That's right. And that's why I've come back to it here, because there's more to it than just, oh, this is what the law says. This is different. This is what you feel. This is a highly emotionally charged statement.
And if I may, I want to refer back to Rabbi Miri's comment question that psychologically people feel persecution in different ways, in different facets of it. Some people feel pressure. We get the word pressure or oppression. Some people feel that they're alone, they're singled out, and no one else feels the same kind of pain, and on and on and on and on. So I think that's the direction that you were going as to why there's this list of that God acknowledged or God responded to in an individual, people would say, or the commentaries would say, in a different way to each person, because God appears in a different way to each person doesn't mean that it's different gods.
Very good. Which also brings up.
Me one second.
It's okay. Thank you, Rabbi. Yes, Ricky.
Just all during this discussion of the three different blah, 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 is that why we now say bad things happen in threes? Like when 3 of something happens, you say, okay, it's happened in threes.
It could. I don't know if it literally refers to this or not, but
the tradition for saying that bad things happen in threes may have come. Yeah.
So when we recite, this brings to mind certain other things we do ritually. We recite the Mishabarak Prayer. Okay, and we do it on behalf of not just the named individuals, but anyone else who isn't named. We always say that. We have the Kaddish Prayer, another emotional prayer. And we say it in the name of not just the people on the list, but everyone else. Okay. So what are the different levels of severity of these different situations? Do we just do it when we, to the one person, the small group of people, in the community? Do we do it for the entire community? And yes, we do have prayers for the entire community. Do we do it for our nation? Yeah. Do we do it for the entire world?
All of the above.
That's the point I was trying to make. So it's all encompassing. So maybe when we say, oh, why is this happening to me? It requires a lot more, not just saying that it requires more people, but putting it for us to put in context of the plight of others.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
Marty, during the Yom Kippur, when we do this one,
Yes,
we do it in the language of plural. Because, there is a long list and you say, well, I didn't do that. I didn't do that.
but in a
But
way,
someone in your community did that. So we
Yes.
do it in plural.
That's right.
Ask for forgiveness.
So this whole passage gives way to a lot of tangents. Michael had one. Here's another one that it becomes very important. It's not just a simple comment. It's much deeper. It's much deeper. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
What comes to my mind, and this is interesting, that's why I love to come to Torah study, is that you think in ways that you didn't think before. But if we remember the 10 plagues, they also escalated, and perhaps that's something that first we did this and then that, and the worst of the worst came at the end. So maybe there is also first I torture and then I oppress and then I did that. Anyway, just a thought.
No, but that is the human condition. When do we start crying, have a public outcry of something? It's usually when a certain level has been reached that an entire group of people feel a certain way. And
Yes, well,
there are lots of different examples.
It's when
Please.
It comes at a point. The public outcry comes when something specific happens. When something is a straw breaker.
The tipping point. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
That's right.
I mean, that's when it would happen.
Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
I believe Larry had his hand up before.
And Chris.
And then Chris. Larry, you're muted.
Okay, an example, how many people have to die at an intersection before they put up a light?
Which brings me to the song. I do not know who wrote it, but I heard it sung by Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Right.
Okay.
What song?
How many years?
Oh, it's Bob
Once
Dylan.
the people exist before they're allowed to be free.
Was written by Bob Dylan.
This
Bob
has
Dylan.
come up. This has come up, and they cite numerous examples in that song, which I think is very helpful. Chris and then David.
Oh, I had my, okay.
Oh, okay. I'm losing count, but I'm glad we're getting into this discussion. Yes, Chris. I'm going to let Ricky and David think about who came first, and then we can go from there. But first, Chris.
You're muted, Chris.
Chris, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. It just reminded me of 9/11. During the incident, it seemed like we all really went down to our knees. We all cried out to God, and you could feel it in the whole nation that it was an outcry for what we were experiencing. Other countries went down to their knees and also prayed for us. And that was an unmanageable situation where you could feel that presence, that I felt the deliverance from God on those days, the closeness of him on such a time in our lives. That's all I wanted to say.
Good point. So I missed who had their hand up first, David or Chris? Okay.
Ricky.
I mean Ricky.
When they're finally in action, I think is the sort of the underlying question here. When does, something happen? And to me, it's always, well, when it happens to me, everybody group.
Yeah.
I have this, right? I don't know if anybody can read it, but first they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist.
Good point.
They came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. And I kind of learned a lesson with this, that, we got to stop whatever is the progression at some point.
Right.
That's what I'm kind of hearing. What is that point that enough people, the socialists, the trade unionists, and the Jews get together and speak out before, we get to the end of this thing. But I love this little thing. It's right here.
Very good. David.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that Dylan wrote Blowing in the Wind approximately 1962, and it was sung pretty quickly by Peter Palmieri. It made it so famous and so appropriate, Marty, that you mentioned it.
So it is, and if you've forgotten the words, look them up because it parallels the discussion we're having. And it is, I think it's a rather important thing.
I think it's even in our prayer book, because I think the rabbi has used it in the service.
Yes.
I know.
Suppose we find somebody in need of help of any sort as an individual. What does Judaism tell us?
You respond by saying Hineni.
Right.
That's it. That's right.
Can you repeat
Hineni, here I am.
Exactly.
Okay, good deeds done together. Okay. But doing it that one time, the feeling you get within is going to stimulate you to get that feeling again and again to help others, as Larry is pointing out. But by one person doing, others will see what you're doing and respond because they get that feeling too. I want to be part of that feeling. Okay, now I see a bunch of hands. Michael had his hand.
If I can,
okay.
It's that what you're saying is true and Jewishly authentic, that the point is not for each individual to be the one person who will change the world. The point is that each person, mitzvah goreret mitzvah, that each person serves as an inspiration for someone else to be follow. Participating in, right. Like Larry was just talking about mitzvah day, okay? That's our role, not to be the one person who changes the world, but the one person who encourages and inspires other to join in changing the world.
But the person you help the person you save could be the most important person in the world
And,
yet to
and
come.
if he or she is not, it doesn't even matter
Right.
because we're on the right
You
track.
don't know. You never know who that's going to be.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
and when a person dies, we say it's like the entire world is
feels.
כאילו עולם שלם, and the entire world, the world disappear. As you said, we don't know what that person was supposed to do. Sorry.
Perfect. Now, Michael has had his hand up for a very long time, then Larry, and then Ricky.
Okay.
You asked if we go to help somebody if they're in need or something like that, and you could say, "Here I am," or "Here I am here for you."
Yeah.
Now, do they actually mean the same thing? Here I am, or I'm here for you. Do they actually mean the same thing? I don't think so. Here I am, but more, in my opinion, here I am, but more of a
Emphasis?
of a, how would I say it? No,
The emphasis is on the person,
right?
who's saying it, as opposed to the person who needs that help.
I see it as oh God, I wish I could do this. But it's more pressure. Let me put it that way. Here I am, but it's more pressure that no matter what, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. I am here for you. There's less of a pressure involved with that saying. That's how I personally see it.
Okay, that's good. I'm getting an echo. No more. Okay. Okay. Yes, Larry, and
I wanted
then
to
Ricky.
say how proud I was of Beth Shalom. Yesterday, we hosted a number of projects for Mitzvah Day, and we were very involved in the formation of the whole project, and it was quite successful. But back to our discussion, part of the saying is that we are not obligated to complete the task, but we cannot turn away from trying and doing it. I don't remember the exact words. That's the gist.
You want it in English or Hebrew?
It is not up to you to complete the work, yet you are not free to abstain from it.
Thank you.
Right.
That was the sentence I was going to read.
I was
Good
close,
point.
right?
It's in Pirkei Avot, right, in the Mishnah.
Avot
Yes,
2:21.
Thank you. Yes, David. Wendy wants to. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Wendy, it's your turn. You're up.
As everybody was talking about action, inaction, who does what, it reminded me of a quote that I thought was so profound. I actually saved it for my paper is going yellow. And this is it. There was an important job to be done in building membership for organizational growth, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry because it was everybody's job, but everybody still thought that somebody would do it. Still, nobody asked anybody. It ended up that the job wasn't done. Everybody blamed somebody when actually nobody asked anybody. And then I realized I was somebody.
Sounds like Abbott and Costello.
Pretty much.
Who's on first?
Right?
I can remember it exactly. I have one similar. A group of people cannot, decide what to do, but a board, a committee can decide nothing can be done.
Very good.
Puzzled. Each individual says, I can't do it, but as a board, they can say nothing can be done.
Interesting.
Delay it.
table. We'll table that discussion.
Right.
Anyway, any other comments? Well, I think we've taken this verse to task, no pun intended. David or anyone who would like to read verse 8, only verse 8.
I'll do it for you. Okay, 8. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the region of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites.
Okay. Any comments?
Hey, that great land is occupied.
Well, one
Yes.
thing that the land of milk and honey, those are two foodstuffs that do not require the destruction of whatever it is that causes it. So the cow still lives and the bee still lives. Everything else, a vegetable, a plant, an animal, is dead, is finished when we eat it. But those two, they don't. So they're perpetual machines. What's the word? We use for
An interesting take on it.
renewable. They're renewables.
It's an interesting take on it. I like that. Any other comments?
I'm not sure why all the translations seem to say that to take you out or to rescue them from that land. The Hebrew is from from the land, but okay, Aretz Hahi. I get it. Yeah, but it just struck me as why it was necessary. But okay.
I stress that word in my reading because
right, exactly. And,
Any comments?
Well, that land, okay, to a land, to a good and spacious land. So I guess they're implying that land is the opposite.
It's just a little tongue-tied. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take you from the land to the land, and
Right.
Do you remember what we read last week about coming and going? Okay, that one implies if someone says go, they are implying an answer, come. And if you say come, you're providing an answer to go. It's just a play on the two words. Yes, please, Joanne. Joanne, yes.
When I read the Hittites, et cetera, haven't they had fights with them before, or I'm not sure. So it looks to me like God is inviting them and saying, I'm going to bring you to a land of milk and honey, but there's sure going to be a lot of fights occur. And how are they going to make friends, et cetera, so that doesn't occur?
Okay, that's a good question. Yes, Don?
Well, this verse is actually a fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham, isn't it?
Right.
Bring the Hebrews to the land of milk and honey. And so we waited the several centuries and for a great oppression to the Hebrews to make that happen. But I also have the same question as Joanne, is that this is also the foreshadowing of bloodthirsty encounters between the Hebrews leaving Egypt and then taking over Canaan and the other lands. It's some of the most gruesome, bloodthirsty action.
Okay, first, before I recognize the rabbi and then Chris, I wanted to say that this has not been recurrent as far as saying the land of milk and honey. This is the first time we see this in scripture. He always refers to Canaan as the land, the promised land. But this is the first time the milk and honey is being used. So I'm going to defer to the rabbi and then Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. In the promises to the patriarchs, it's not referred to as land of milk and honey, which means that this is a further attraction for the Israelites who have been slaves and have been impoverished and hungry to know that they're going to a place where there will be plenty. The traditional understanding is that, and those are correct, that it's a foreshadowing, if you will, that there will be battles, but that God is saying, God is not saying that the Canaanites and all the other, and there are different lists in different parts of the Torah of how many different tribes there are and their names and whatever, but it doesn't say that land belongs to them. The implication, if not the exact explicit wording, is that that's where they're living or dwelling, but not that the land belongs to them. The theology is that the land belongs to God, the earth belongs to the Lord, and God can assign whomever God chooses to live wherever. So that's the traditional Jewish understanding of it. But yes, there's the foreshadowing that this is not, it's not going to be a free and clear gift, or free and clear title to the land.
Good point. Okay, Chris?
Yes, I like to say that I see that he has given them the promise of the land, along with the threats of war and things like that. But I have to totally appreciate Rabbi's point that the land does not belong to anybody, but it is God. And I also think it goes with the idea that God is putting this out there for them to trust him and get to know him. Because at that point, I don't think, yes, they have cried to God, but they had been away from the ways of a Jewish way. Is that correct, Rabbi? When they were pretty much assimilated with the Egyptians and do the Egyptians' will, the knowledge of God as what we see him now, it was strange to those people who had been enslaved for so long. So I think this was a way of them to trust God, to believe what he had just said, and to recognize him for his promises. Kind of build up again on, let me show you who I am. Not so much to Moses, because Moses understood that so clearly, but for the rest of the people who were still debating, should we follow Moses or should we go back to the land of onions and garlic or whatever? So that's my take on that. I don't know, but I believe it's built on trust and create a reputation if I may, and I need correction if I'm wrong.
Okay, well, thank you.
I think, Marty,
okay.
that we have all this, when it says the land of milk and honey, the continuation is to the place that these people are
Right.
living. So I'm proving to you that this is a good place. You know, if they chose to be there, it's not desert. If it was bad, they wouldn't have been there.
Okay. Which raises another question. In my mind, I get a message that you're going to have to, it's not that I'm giving you everything, you're going to have to earn it. Here's the land. You're going to have to make it arable. You're going to have to do a whole bunch of things.
Work it.
That's right. You're going to have to show that you earn it, that you merit earning it. And not just by taking it from people, but doing something more positive with it. Okay, the land, we have said, belongs to God. But we are saying also that in doing so, we recognize this and we're going to take care of it, be stewards of God's land.
It goes back to Genesis very early.
That's correct. So maybe that's part of it. Somebody else had their hand up a while ago, and I forget who it was. Okay, thank you, Joanne, then Michael.
Okay. I feel like, and I'm pleased this occur, and I like all of your answers. But I still feel like they're invaders going back to where they were, but it's 400 years. And it's like they're going to have to repossess whatever they left. That's the human way. And so when I read this, I cringe, and yet I'm pleased with what occurred. You know, they did, take over the land, etc.
So just to come up with a different example, based on what Michael and the rabbi were discussing earlier, if we put it into modern times, what happens after the Holocaust?
The state of Israel is formed.
Yes, very
And
much.
it didn't take 40 years either.
No.
Thank goodness.
So now if we put it into that context, how do we feel?
Well, I feel good about this because my girlfriend was born. And
Okay.
about 9 months later, one of the first children in Israel.
Fascinating. Yes, Ricky. And excuse me, Ricky. Michael had his hand up before. I apologize, Michael. Then Ricky.
Yeah, I was focusing for a while on the term milk and honey, and where that actually came up, who came up, and what does that actually mean? And so I was, I came up with my own thoughts on it, unless there are official thoughts, but my own thoughts. The milk would represent growth and health. I would see that as what milk would stand for. Honey would stand for a trouble-free existence.
Fascinating. Very interesting. I like that.
Or a sweet New Year. Okay.
Except that the trouble-free existence and the sweetness has to come with a sting attached to it.
Yes. Good. Good point. Good point. I like that too. Yes, Ricky.
Well, I've mentioned this before, but so many times I hear, and what we were just saying about the Holocaust and the state of Israel, is it God's intentional will that there was a Holocaust? No. But the consequence of the events, the consequential will of God could be the formation of the state of Israel. So that what happens was not the intention. The consequence that comes out later is the goodness. And, you know, we've all had experiences in our lives that were, quote, awful, but became the source of something really, really good, the consequence.
The learning experience.
Well, you know, that's the
Yeah.
bottom line. But I mean,
Yeah.
even in other, I mean, I'll give you a simple example. I got married very young. Okay, fine. I also got divorced very young. And I was working in New York City, and I was maybe, 22 or ish, 22 to 25-ish. And there was a gal in the office who was my age, and she said something about, you know, Ricky, we should be safely married. And I'm thinking, you know, my marriage was pretty awful, but I would never be an old maid. That was the consequence, that I have this positive. I would never be like she was, worried that she would be an old maid because I'd already been married. It was like, you know, so you can turn so many bad things into something good.
Sure.
In addition to the lesson learned, I married a little wiser the next time. Not much, but a little bit wiser.
For those of you who have been to Israel and the Middle East, could you describe what the land looks like?
Depends on where you go.
And said, where in
Southern
Israel?
Arizona.
In the land that would have been close to Canaan. And that's why I said Israel in the
Well,
middle.
again, you have great differences between the north and the south and the plain and the hills and the Judean hills. So you still can't say just the land of Canaan.
I think he wants a desert.
Well, let's say for the land of
It's
Canaan.
Arizona.
I'm sorry. What?
It was
Sorry.
not a desert. It was not a desert. By history, not story, by history, that was called the crescent, the Fertile
Fertile
Crescent.
Crescent.
And yeah, so that part of the coast, it was a lot of of mishar, but please help me out, of traveling and bringing stuff from one place to the other. It was a way to pass by. So this was a very important part. Not the desert, not the Judah desert, but I learned in school.
But
Okay.
Fertile Crescent,
Can you think? Oh, okay. Yes, Ricky, and then Joanne.
Well, the Fertile Crescent, which is between the Euphrates and the Tigris, I thought was so much further
It's
east.
further east, northeast. Yes.
And all the way
But
to the Mediterranean.
Continues because yes, there's still a fertile area, you know, the Sharon Plain and whatever, and that was the major highway that connected in both directions.
But I don't think of it as fertile like the Nile Delta, which
We
was
had this discussion 3 years ago. Okay, when we were talking about the wanderings of Abraham, so that God could see, you know, that Abraham could see what was going to be bestowed.
Oh.
Okay. And we had a discussion about this. Okay, because but we didn't go into the details because you have a coastal area.
Beautiful coastal area.
You have a mountainous area.
You
Right?
have a plains, you have a desert.
You have the Valley of Israel, the Galilee, in the area where Syria used to be.
Right.
It's very fertile, yeah.
Has anyone ever driven up the mountains of Hawaii? And what is the plant life like as you go up the mountain?
It gets less and
Yes,
less.
Michael. I'm sorry. What, David?
It gets less and less as the higher you go up towards.
Well, not quite.
Yeah.
That's any
It's
good.
true. It's true, depending on altitude. But think of what grows in the mountains near here. Are they the same as you see around the base of the mountain? Yes, Michael.
You're muted, Michael.
Michael, you're muted.
You're muted.
From my own experience, based on your general question, that it's very lush. It's when you're going up a mountain and you're looking into the hills, it's like a jungle. At least when I drive up to the town of Hana,
Yes.
at the top of Maui, and I've
Yes.
driven that many times. And every time I said I'm not going to do it again, but I do it again. It's a treacherous. It's treacherous almost, but it gets very lush and it's all green, and it's incredible because you have different shades of green going up in there, and so that's what you would see, and it doesn't. As far as that goes, it doesn't die out. It doesn't get any thinner. It just holds up. It just holds up because of the moisture. As you go up to Maui, it starts to actually rain as you're going up there. You're in the clouds. So that's my experience.
Yes, Kilauea is a good example of this but as you go up the mountain, and people who are into gardening know what I'm about to say. You go through different climate zones as you go up the mountain.
Right.
And that's what you're referring to. But the plant life it changes as you go up the mountain. That means you can grow different types of produce in a very small area as you go up the mountain. When the mountains are very tall, David is correct. It becomes desolate.
Yeah, you get past the tree line.
That's right.
That's
right. You go, but you actually go through tundra.
Yeah.
There's going up a tall mountain.
One more thing I'd like to point out, if I may, Marty.
Sure.
As you go up there, along the ground, as you get up higher, you see a line of ruby red pineapples. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They are absolutely. Hello?
It's just an echo for some reason. That's all.
Okay.
But go ahead, finish, and then Ricky.
Okay. You see these ruby red pineapples that are absolutely spectacular. Not the pineapple, but the color. It's absolutely astonishing. And what the Hawaiians use that you can't eat them. They're not edible, but they use them to garnish very fancy tables, like a table at a wedding, and that type of thing. I just thought you'd find that interesting.
Wow.
Okay.
Really good.
Let me share with you a very important fact versus everything that you are describing. In Israel, the mountains are very low. Nothing is very high except the mount that we got as a present during the 6-Day War, in Lebanon, because there is snow and they ski. All the trees in Israel were planted all the way to Jerusalem that is covered with pines. Everything was planted. And that's why you gave money, I hope, to the Keren Kayemet LeIsrael, which is an organization that the job was there. And today, if you want to give a nice present to someone, you plant a tree in Israel and you get a nice note about it. But it's very important that we understand that, and that we understand that not all the land was fertile. The people that arrived there made it. They dried the Ahula swamps, unfortunately. Now they're flooding it away for habitat. But it's a different type of area. These days we remove the salt from the land in the south. and people grow things that they never appear there. Comparing this to the trees in other places is a little tricky. Just one note, I don't know where I read it, was that honey meant dates.
Dates, yes, at that time.
D-A-T-E-S,
Yes,
honey.
yes.
That was
Wait
my
a minute,
parent
okay.
Israel.
Okay, several different people have had their hands up for a while. First, Joanne, okay, then I'm going to do Larry, and then Michael, and then I guess, Ricky, I don't know if you had your hand up, and okay. So Joanne, Larry, Michael.
Our first trip to Israel was 1976. We stayed in a kibbutz, and there they grew bananas, etc. But it was pretty dry. We also at that time went up with our children into the Golan Heights, and all of a sudden a policeman guard came up. It was just a small building with, on stilts, and he said to us, "Go back now," kind of thing. We turned around real quickly to head back down the mountain. In the kibbutz, there was actually where there was wood for a path that had bloody footsteps on it. So it really was a place of much fighting at that point. I've been back since, and like Rabbi Mary says, it's really a beautiful place with all the trees that are then planted and other things. But being there right after the wars, etc., was really interesting.
Thank you.
right.
Thank you for that. Yes, Larry.
Okay, I would like to go back to verse 8, where they're listing the places, the Canaanite, Hittite, Amorite, Perizzite, on and on. We don't have any distinct difference listed of them. Some in the history, it says warlike. Were they fighting each other? Did any believe in a god or different gods? Were there different forms of political structure, authoritarian or democracy? We're lumping them. And I think there is a difference that we should know about.
It's an excellent point. Yes.
It's probably, if I may, it's probably geographic. They're not parasites. The Perizzites were, in one area. The Amorites were in another area. The Jebusites were in a third area. So it's more geographic. But you're right that we don't know what distinguished them at all. Did they, we assume that they spoke the same language. We assume that they had the same pattern of idol worship, but that's only an assumption.
Like
Well,
Africa.
we make the assumption, but there's something that in Abraham's story about when he has to deal with the Hittites.
With the cave of Mach, when purchasing.
Yes. Why does he
bought it?
Why does he buy it? We had this discussion
Make
3
sure
years
that
ago.
it's his.
Then it says,
To have a document.
That's
If
right.
it's not written, it doesn't exist.
But they had the idea that it was proper to own the land. And maybe this is part of the equation, just a little part of everything else that's been mentioned, that the true owner is God. And, we had that discussion, but the Hittites, we were told, well, if Abraham had to purchase the land from them, that suggests that they had a territory that they felt was their land.
Okay, that was the problem with the Native Americans here.
Exactly.
believed
Exactly.
all land belonged to the Creator, and then the white man came and wanted ownership. And also, they looked at all Native Americans as being so similar. They all lived in teepees, and there's so many misconceptions.
I know. Perfect, Larry. That's a perfect example. So there were several other people. Michael, I think you were next.
I think you're right.
Okay. Because I got distracted with other discussion.
I know that. I understand that. I understand it. So
Okay,
anyway.
please, Michael, and then Chris.
Okay, I want to see if I can recall now what the hell I wanted to say. I think it was Rabbi Mary mentioned a little while ago the word honey. I mentioned something about that.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and say what I mentioned about thinking about the word milk and honey. I attached health and growth with milk, and the reason I mentioned honey, and I said that a peaceful existence. What I meant by that is that. Let me say it this way. In Yom Kippur, people wish other people a sweet year. See? And so what does that mean? What does a sweet year mean? To me, it means a year of a trouble-free year. That's how I meant that. See?
Okay. That's good.
That's all I wanted to say. And when that sparked when Rabbi Mary mentioned the word honey, and I can't recall in what context she was talking about.
Okay, Chris. Very good, Michael.
Yes, I kind of have a question. Going back to this property and who the property belongs to and who the people that were there, it just remind me of Abraham buying the land of the cave of Machpelah to bury Sarah into that property. And the man of that land gave him that land to bury his wife, but he chose to purchase that land. Is there any significance to that? Can someone kind of tell me I realized that it was important for Abraham to know that that piece was his. I understand that part. But what was the urgency of buying the land when it was given to him already? And
well, he chooses to purchase it rather than being accepting
it to him. Right.
That's right.
But it won't have anything to do with what we're talking about, the property of the land and the space that belongs to God.
Well, I'm going to defer some of that discussion to the rabbis because there is midrash on this.
Okay, thank you. You're on.
I cannot think of it.
I really am putting the rabbis under pressure here, and I apologize. Should I get it started?
Well, you can. I just wanted to go back for one thing when we were talking about the dates, the milk and honey and the dates and whatever.
Sure.
That not only the Jewish lore, but also many of the stories from that the culture, the Arab culture, Palestinian culture, whatever, talking about someone who went off on his own and whatever, and in his knapsack, or he had some milk, but also had a bunch of dates.
Right.
And
very good.
And then wherever he or she wound up, they would plant the seeds of the dates to establish an oasis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's very likely that the honey didn't mean just bees honey, but it also meant dates. I just wanted to.
Very good point. Very good point. There is Don. Yes.
Just asking for clarification again. When we think of land ownership, then we have to think about boundaries. And boundaries, unless the land is clearly bound by natural marks like rivers and seas and so on, then you've got a pile of stones in the ground. On one side is yours and the other side is mine. So how is that midrash? Because here come the Hebrews across the desert and they're coming into Canaan. So where are the boundaries established? And how is it resolved?
Yeah, really good question, Doc.
Okay,
Now,
Rabbi Mary.
where you can look at that is further ahead is when the tribes get pieces of land. And you're right, in the past it was natural ways of separating, but it was a very clear separation of the land that belonged to each one of the tribes, including a couple of tribes that asked not to be on the other side of the Jordan as the boundary, but split it in both sides. So you're absolutely right about the natural thing. I always think about it. And I don't know how the tribes did it, but they certainly did it. They had all kinds of tricks to find out if you belong there or not.
Camel tracks. No, I'm only kidding. So we any other questions about what we have just read? Okay, there are two more hands, and then I guess that's going to be it for today. So Joanne, you're first, and then Michael. Larry, did you have a hand too?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was it up before? I don't remember.
Yes, it was.
It
before.
was. Okay, let Larry, Joanne, and Michael.
Okay, I've been studying archaeology on this continent. In the 13th century, there was a huge drought and a depopulation in the area of southern Colorado and Utah, and moving people along the Rio Grande and into what's now Hopi Navajo territory. And some of these, let's call them tribes, groups that moved, really integrated well into those. Some took over, some were taken over, and there has always been movement of people throughout history, and often due to climate change.
Good point. Good point. Okay, Joanne, you're on.
Okay. I was remembering like something about honey, and I found it, and it says honey was revered in ancient Egypt, and until recently the oldest honey in the world was indeed found in an Egyptian tomb. That 3,000-year-old honey had been placed in honey pots in the tomb of deceased Pharaoh King Tut to keep him happy on his celestial journey. But I discovered that the Arana cave paintings in Valencia, Spain, that are 8,000-year-old have pots of honey within them. So honey is really an old tradition.
It was considered as a gift of the gods by many tribes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Michael.
Okay.
And then you're going to have the last word, Michael, I guess.
Okay. I'll take it. I find the word persecution kind of interesting, in the respect that usually it's applied to groups. The word persecution, a certain particular group like the Jews have been persecuted, or the blacks. But can you also apply the word persecution to one person? Can one person be persecuted? Usually it's and under what situation. Let me take this example. Can one Jew be persecuted as a single person?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say yes too, but it's never said that way. And you would apply it to because of the fact of how that person is looked at, and how they're being demonized and that type of thing. So I would say yes, one person can be persecuted. I would say.
Good, an excellent point. Ricky, you do have some time.
Last thing, let's go back to the honey that I thought about when Joanne was talking. Honey is also a foodstuff that doesn't spoil. If it gets hard to rocky, just melt it again, and so that's one more thing about the real honey. I don't know about
I'm sure it was in the manna.
Yeah, but mind the beeswax. Mary, Rabbi Mary, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
No, but I was thinking about my friend who lives in Vermont, and she gets not honey, but maple out of the trees.
That's right.
Quite close.
Very nice. Very nice.
You scoop the mold off and you reboil it.
We will come back to this the next time we meet, because I think a few more people have ideas about this, which are good, and then we will go on. So we'll come back to and see if anyone has anything else to say about verse 8 next week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Then we will go
2
from
weeks,
there.
Marty.
2 weeks, Marty.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. Thank you for reminding me.